How many types of grief are you currently processing? When we often talk about grief, we speak about it in the context of losing someone that we love, and that's valid. We get that. But there's so many other ways that grief can show up. In 2025, one of my goals is to bring authenticity to places that are uncomfortable for me. And what felt authentic for me today was to talk about grief. But my grief, the multiple layers, the different ways that I'm processing, coping, and moving through it. And my goal is that as you watch this video, if you are currently grieving, that you gift yourself permission to grieve in whatever way works for you. The first way that we talk about grief and really interact and intersect with grief is when we lose a loved one. And I've been very open about my journey over the last couple years, where from 2019 to 2023, I lost 18 people close to me. Yes, 18. Every time I say it, I wonder, like, how am I still here? How am I still dealing with this? With the very first one, dying, passing away while speaking to me on the phone. Grief is one of those things that's not linear. It doesn't decrease over time. And depending on the connection, there can be a myriad of feelings and emotions that come up for you. And that's really what it has been for me. I can go several days, weeks, months without feeling the heaviness and the weight of grief. And then there's a song or a scent or a location that brings you right back to that moment, to the reality that the person that you love, the person that you care about, the person that you expected to be here much longer than they were is no longer here. We're talking about grief. And I know that there's so many gems and wonderful statements about grief. Grief is proof that you have loved. Grief is love with nowhere to go. We understand it. And for me, my spirit is fine. My spirit is always fine. I understand that although they are not in this earth realm, I still have access to them. And because I am also human, I still grieve. If that's you, give yourself permission to grieve in any way that works for you for as long as you want. I know sometimes people get tired of you talking about that person, or maybe it's a pet. They get tired of you talking about it. Keep talking. They get tired of you journaling about it or mentioning it. Keep journaling about it. Keep mentioning it for as long as you need. This is your grief, and there's no rules. Another layer of grief that I'm currently moving through is estrangement. Estrangement from family members. I tell people that it is an absolute blessing to have family, your parents, your siblings, cousins, etc., that you're close to, that you interact with, that you can turn to and lean on, recognizing that that's a blessing because that's not everyone's reality. That's not my reality. Still in touch and close with my parents, but not so much with some of my siblings. And two things can be true simultaneously. You can understand why the disconnection occurred. You can understand the reason for the estrangement, whether it was my choice or their choice. And you can still miss, you can still long for, you can still yearn for the connection that you do not have. It's a real thing. Again, when we talk about grief, these are some of the ways that we're not addressing, highlighting, or even giving space for people to feel. And so if you are one of those people who are estranged from your family of origin, from your family, your siblings, your parents, your grandparents, cousins, etc., understand that it is okay. It is okay to grieve that connection and to grieve it for as long as you need and in any way that you need. Have you ever had a friendship breakup? Mm, yeah, I had two of those in the last year, and they hurt. And they hurt. Again, one of my favorite things to say is that two things can be true simultaneously. And simultaneously, I miss the connection. I miss the laughter. I miss the conversations. I miss just how we connected. I miss the work that we did together. And I also recognize that the who that they are is not compatible, congruent, and safe for the me that I am in this season. They're both true. I can miss you, and I can know that we can't be in community together. But it hurts. It hurts, especially if you've been friends for a very long time, if you've had some life experiences together. It can truly hurt. And I'm working my way through that. Of course, for that one, it's kind of decreasing over time, but there's some days I remember and I'm just sad. I'm no longer angry. I'm just sad at the lost connection. And it's okay. This is not yet another way that we grieve, another level of grief that we still have to process. Still processing grief from disconnection from my faith community. Ay, ay, ay. This has happened to me several times, and maybe in another day I'll unpack it in journaling. But I have not only worked for several faith communities, but that's been my home community, my home church. And I've had at least two that ended horribly. I mean, horribly. And you'd think that church should be a safe place, an emotionally and psychologically safe environment for you to be. But these have been some of the most toxic and injurious spaces that I have ever been in. The last one that I was in ended in 2022, and some days I'm still grieving. I'm still hurt. I'm still sad, and I'm still angry. Two things can be true simultaneously. I can miss the community. I can miss the conversations. I can miss seeing people eyeball to eyeball. And I can recognize that I either outgrew it was no longer safe for me, or that the fit just wasn't right. Both can be true. And I'm still grieving the hurt, the disconnect, the separation. Very, very real place. And here's the thing, when it comes to faith communities and churches, I know sometimes, we get the messaging, I sometimes manipulation and gaslighting, that if you're not connected to your faith community and to your church, then you are definitely going to hell, or you're outside the will of God and you need a covering, etc., etc., etc. What is always missing from those conversations is the injury and the wounding that has taken place. It's always get right back into community and never let's address and talk about what hurt you, who hurt you, how can I help you heal, how can I assist you and aid you in processing so you feel like being in a faith community is safe once again. Those are the conversations that need to be had, and those are the conversations that aren't being had. And so fortunately, unfortunately, I don't think it's sad. I'm not directly connected to a faith community right now, but I have a tribe of people that I'm connected to, and we are spiritual and share faith in our own way. Listen, if you have left the church, left your community, and you are feeling bad about it, then process that. If you are not feeling bad about it, continue to do what works for you. Recognize that all parts of us need to be supported: body, mind, soul, spirit. And so do what is necessary for your spirit to be fortified and supported. But do not yield to the guilt, to the manipulation, and to the gaslighting. Ooh, this is a big one. This is actually the area of grief that compelled me to do this video, which is job separation. Whether you were fired or you were forced to resign, depending on how it happened, that is another layer and level and area of grief that you have to process. And I am almost 3 years, maybe going on 4 years removed from one position, one job, and I still am processing the grief. It wasn't about the job or the title or the tasks. It was really about, it was a position that I enjoyed and I was really able to help people and to serve people. But the way that it ended, the way that the people that I worked with and that were supposed to support me, the way that I was treated is where the trauma and really where the grief resides. And when you think about it, the work relationship is the only relationship where we are kind of pushed, forced, and expected to get right back into one as soon as possible. Think about it. If you end a marriage, if you end a relationship, what advice do people give you? Take your time, don't rush into anything, focus on yourself, do some self care. But when the work relationship ends, where's the empathy? Where's the compassion? Where's the respect? Where's the kindness? Where's the softness that we often see when other relationships end? People get tired of you talking about it. I know, I'm sure there are people who are tired of hearing me talk about that position, that job. But there was a wounding, there was grief, there is grief involved, and it's valid. We're not making space for it. And my question is why? If you've been separated from a job, from a position, from a career, etc., and you're still grieving, I just want to let you know that it's valid, that your grief is valid, that it's okay to make space for the hurt, make space for the emotion, make space for the pain, make space for the accompanying anger and rage that can come up. As humans, we will experience a full spectrum of emotion. We can't only live on the side that's happy and cheerful and fun and giddy and excited. Sometimes we are going to experience sadness, depression, anxiety, frustration, overwhelm. And those feelings are okay too. Have you ever had your safety threatened? Have you ever been a victim of a violent crime or adjacent to crime? I haven't shared publicly about it, but last July I was blocked into a parking spot by a white van, that proverbial white van, very Law and Order SVU. I was blocked into a parking space. The van would not move, and I had to do significant maneuvers to get out of that parking spot. And at first I thought it was in my head, but then as I started to move, the van started to move. I started to move, the van started to move. I went around a building. The van followed me around the building. I drove through a gas station. I was followed. I did a U-turn onto a main road. It also did a U-turn. And then I was like, okay, this is real. I put on my hazards. I ran a red light and I was driving to the sheriff's department compound. And right before I got to where the sheriff's office began, the van turned off. I was shaken. It was a violation of my safety, a violation of my autonomy, a violation of just everything that I thought and knew to be safe. Even in that, as traumatic as it was for me, even in that, there was some grief because I had to mourn the person that I was before I knew that this isn't just a Law and Order episode, but that this actually happens and it happened to me. I had to mourn that the society and the environment that I thought was relatively safe is actually not as safe as I thought. And if you've experienced any violent crime, or if you have experienced vicarious trauma as a result of seeing a crime committed, there is some grief there. If no one has ever told you that, I'm letting you know that it's okay to grieve. Grieve the person that you were before these experiences happened. And finally, the last area of grief that I'm currently still processing and working through is the grief with our society and the social change that I've seen over the last 13 years. I am grieving the me that didn't know about an America with such a heavy racial consciousness. I'm grieving the me that is now aware or wasn't aware that there are people who could not like me because of the color of my skin. I'm grieving the me that was very comfortable identifying as a Caribbean person, Caribbean woman, a Trinbagonian Tomian. I'm grieving the me that now has to check a box that says Black or African American and understand that it's not with those terms, Black or African American, but for me, it is so reductionary to boil all of my culture and all of who I am into just those terms. I'm grieving the me that now has to exist in a world, in a society where, yeah, this is it. There is heightened awareness about my otherness. and the otherness of people that I know. And for a person with multiple identities, Caribbean, Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, woman, and technically living with a disability, recognizing the level of hatred in our nation right now, yeah, there's some grief there. There's some grief because I miss the me that just knew America as the American dream. And that's it. Grief, that's what we're talking about. If you identify with any of these areas of grief that I share, that I discuss, please, again, gift yourself permission to feel, to heal, to process, and to move through grief in whatever way works for you. Grief isn't linear. It will not, does not, oftentimes does not decrease over time. But you do have time and space to feel and heal in whatever way you need. I encourage you to share any ways that you are currently grieving and how you're processing it in the comments, and I'll respond to as many of them as I can.